Mह्यं ददाति स्वापदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं सागजातं सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांता राधा कांता नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वंशकल्पतरुश्च कृपा सिन्धुवैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वतीदेवे गौरवाणि प्रसादे निर्विशेषशून्यवादी पाश्चात्य जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत शिवसादि गौरवृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. All right. So, good morning, everyone. Just super quickly, as you can notice, yesterday we finished up the Krishna book. So, essentially, from today onwards, we're going to be discussing daily various pastimes from the Srimad Bhagavatam based on the collection from this book. I don't know. There we go. Yeah. It's mystical stories from the Bhagavatam. It's a wonderful book. From Rajendra Prabhu. So we are taking excerpts from this book from this week, this day onwards for all of our topics. So, and if you, of course, need the title, we can always provide that for you. So you can also buy the book for yourself. Okay, so we today will be discussing the story of Gajendra, the king elephant, and how he fights the crocodile. So let's set the scene first, right? So we start at a beautiful lake in Lord Varuna's garden in one of the heavenly planets. There's beautiful trees swaying in the background. There's lots of beautiful flowers, beautiful fruits. The water is crystal clear. There's different kinds of animals frolicking about the land, from swans, cranes, tortoises, fish. And in the background, we can see the Trikuta mountain, right? And that's decorated with lots of fancy crystals and minerals and lots of waterfalls, making lots of nice sounds and sights. And then surrounding that mountain, we have the famous ocean of milk, which was, as we all know, churned once by the gods and the demons to produce nectar. But that's a different pastime we'll get into later on, Kartik. So this is quite the gorgeous scenery, right? It's very beautiful, it's very peaceful. But if we look closely in this lake, in this really beautiful clear lake, you see eyes peeking out. It's not a fish, it's a crocodile, and it's been lying in wait for many, many hours, probably days, waiting for a very specific animal, Gajendra. So Gajendra was the elephant king, huge and strong, and he was considered essentially the king of the animals in this territory, right? Not like the tiger, not a lion. He was so strong that he overpowered even the stereotypical kings of the forest or the jungles or the land, right? So all the other ferocious animals were scared of him. And despite that, this crocodile was dead set on proving everyone wrong and showing Gajendra that he's the boss here, right? So eventually, after waiting and waiting and waiting, eventually Gajendra emerges from the trees of the groves with his entourage of many, many wives, friends, and relatives. And they all start to rush into the water and then start bathing each other, drinking the water to relieve their thirst from having so much fun. It's just a very great time, right? And then as soon as he gets distracted and like raises his, I guess, leg to kind of move forward a little bit deeper into the lake, that's when the crocodile takes the opportunity to clamp on really tightly onto Gajendra's leg. And thus begins the struggle for survival, right? So Gajendra would try to free himself, but the crocodile had enough strength to keep holding onto that leg, right? So this little tug of war kept going on and on and on. and he's looking around for help, right? He's looking at his wives, he's looking at his relatives on the shores, but they're all too afraid to help him. They're just crying on the sidelines, hoping that he becomes free as soon as possible. But they themselves aren't coming into the water to help him. So this struggle continued not for days or months or years, but almost a millennium, right? So that's about 1,000 years, right? The struggle kept going and going and going. And even though I mentioned that Gajendra was strong enough to be the king of the animals, right? This wasn't his home field. He didn't have the home field advantage because the crocodile was in its home field advantage, the water, right? And Gajendra was being dragged deeper and deeper into the water and struggling to get out of this grip of the crocodile's jaw. So anytime both of them get exhausted and have like a few minutes to recover, the crocodile can eat food from the lake and recover very nicely. But Gajendra was unable to get out of the water to recover or even escape, right? So over time, even though the crocodile maintained its strength to a degree, Gajendra was slowly getting worn down more and more and more. And it was getting very, very unlikely that he would win this battle, right? So at this point, after a millennium, uh, he realizes he can't maintain this effort any longer. He comes to the realization that no one's are going to help him. They've all just been looking at him. They they've all not made the effort to even bother helping him, right? And this is the end of his line. He's going to die if he doesn't do something about it, right? And what he comes to the realization is that he has no better choice than to take shelter of the Lord and surrender unto him, right? And then once he makes that very, very clear in his mind that surrender is the only way and no one can help him except for the Lord, then all of a sudden, some Sanskrit words come to his mind and out of his mouth, right? Om Namo Bhagavate Tasmai. I offer my respectful obeisances to the Supreme Lord Vishnu, right? So so what's happening here, right? We never mentioned that Gajendra was a powerful devotee or a very dedicated devotee, dedicated to like the practice of worship and prayer. So what's possessed him to suddenly speak the Sanskrit words that he's never spoken in his life, right? So let's take a step back, a flashback, and take a look at how did our main characters come to their current situation, right? So in his past life, Gajendra was also a king, but he was a human king, King Indradumya. He was the monarch of Pandya, which was a territory in modern day South India. And basically, he was a just king, he was a religious king. And after retiring as the king and giving it to his sons or other people, he left for the forest and lived as an aesthetic, right? Giving away worldly possessions, material relationships, living as minimally as possible so he can focus on devotional service and meditation. So he spent most of his time meditating, deeply meditating on the Lord, right? Basically going into trances where he's just constantly thinking and worshiping the Lord in his mind, right? And then one day during one of those meditations, right, a famous and highly respected sage by the name Agastya, like I'm saying that right, Agastya, he visited the dwelling, right, and they kind of waited around a little bit, maybe, Indra would snap out of a meditation and like, give some greetings or welcome them, but nothing, right? He was so deep in his meditation that he didn't even realize that there was another sage visiting him or a devotee visiting him, and he couldn't even do the bare minimum of welcoming them, offering food or water or washing their feet, nothing, right? Because there was just zero response. And Agastya became so offended because there wasn't even like the bare reciprocation, right? And decides to curse him, right? To become a dumb, dull elephant because of the way he was behaving as a human, right? So eventually, when Indradunya snaps out of the meditation and becomes aware of the fact that he was cursed and what the curse was, he didn't like become angry or try to curse him back or, tit for tat kind of thing. He very, very like, he was very understanding and he accepted the curse, and what it meant for him and why he got it, right? Because he took this opportunity, he took the curse as an opportunity to become purified and for him to correct his own mistakes and become a better devotee and a better person, right? So eventually, when he leaves this body as a human in king of the form of King Indradunya, he becomes the elephant, or is born into the elephant, who becomes known as the Gajendra, king of the animals, right? Okay, so that's how King Indradyumna comes to this stage as Gajendra. And then we have the crocodile. The crocodile in their past life was King Huhu. Okay, so King Huhu was a ruler on the Gandharva planet, and he mostly spent all of his time usually enjoying with the Gandharvas, playing around in the water, like having fun with musical instruments and singing and dancing, etc. Right? And then one time he was kind of frolicking with his fellow associates, and the fun time kind of was taken a little too far, right? So nearby, in the same lake that the present story is taking place, right? The lake in Lord Varuna's groves, there was a sage, Devala, who was taking a bath and doing his rites, right, in the lake. But King Huhu wants to play a practical joke on him. So he sneaks into the water and pulls on the sage's leg. So of course, Devala isn't gonna laugh this off. He's very annoyed and interrupted, his services, right? So he's very annoyed, not amused at all, to the point that he curses King Huhu to transform into a crocodile, right? Like right then and there. And King Huhu, because before that happens, he's showing instant remorse, instant repentance, and realizes his mistake. The sage Devala gives him like an extra benediction on top that comes into play later on, right? But he still has to transform into a crocodile to kind of go through the penance of having offended and interrupted Devala during his services, right? So now that we have the background of our two players, let's go back to the present time, which is their fight, right? So essentially, Gajendra, going ahead too far, Gajendra, by the mercy of the Lord, is able to remember the prayers he had been saying in his past life as king in the Dunya, right? So as soon as that surrender was cemented in his mind, the Lord was merciful enough to help him remember these prayers that he so often said in his previous life, right? So he continues those prayers, and throughout the prayers, right, it's quite a long series of prayers. It was last like at least 20 to 30 verses, right? Most of the prayers are essentially Gajendra glorifying the Lord, his opulences, his qualities, and how he protects his devotees, right? And most of it is praise for the Lord and humbling himself before the Lord. And then there's a couple verses where he kind of specifies what he's actually looking for, right? What is the actual result he wants from, this release from the suffering, right? That's Gajendra's most high goal here. So there are some verses I kind of want to highlight throughout the prayers. Of course, please review them in your own time, them in entirety. But I just found these excerpts to be the most kind of interesting to look at, right? So the excerpts are from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 8, Chapter 3. That entire chapter is the prayers of Gajendra. So that's the reference if you need it. So we're going to look at verse 20 and 21 first. Ekantino yasya na kansanartham vanjanti yeva balava prapanna atyagutam tatcharitam samangalam gayanta anam samudravagna tamaksharam brahma param paresham avyaktam adhyatmika yoga gamyam atindriyam sukshman ivatiduram anantamatyam paripurnameva. Unalloyed devotees who have no desire other than to serve the Lord, worship him in full surrender, and always hear and chant about his activities, which are most wonderful and auspicious. Thus, they always merge in an ocean of transcendental bliss. Such devotees never ask the Lord for any benediction. I, however, am in danger. Thus, I pray to that Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is eternally existing, who is invisible, who is the Lord of all the great personalities, such as Brahma, who is available only by transcendental bhakti yoga. Being extremely subtle, he is beyond the reach of my senses and transcendental to all external realization. He is unlimited, he is the original cause, and he is completely full in everything. I offer my obeisances unto him, right? A key point here is he's comparing himself to unalloyed pure devotees and how pure devotees don't really have any sort of request from the Lord other than the ability to continue doing their devotional service regardless of their setting, right? Even in the material world. But Gajendra is very, very focused on the fact that he's like in danger right now. So he's pretty much honed in and he's saying, I'm not like your pure devotees. So I am really, really like sincerely asking you to save me from this struggle, right? And this you see at the bottom, he's glorifying the Lord and he's offering his obeisances unto him. This is a very common theme in almost all the verses Gajendra is reciting, right? So regardless of whatever he's asking from the Lord, he's always in a humble mood and constantly offering his obeisances to show that he really respects the Lord and is begging for mercy from the Lord, right? There's always that humbling that he's putting himself through. Another beautiful verse from the prayers. Jijivasya naham ihamu yakim antadvahisha shavritaye vayonya ichami kalayana yasya viplavas tasyat maloka varanasya moksham. I do not wish to live anymore after I am released from the attack of the crocodile. What is the use of an elephant's body covered externally and internally by ignorance? I simply desire eternal liberation from the covering of ignorance. That covering is not destroyed by the influence of time. This is also a really great point made by Gajendra because he's come to the realization that all of his, acclaim as like a powerful elephant and this material covering as an elephant is completely useless in this struggle that came before him, right? So he's come to the realization that all of this is useless. What more is there to life other than just being liberated and being able to be with the Lord? And so essentially that's like his main goal, right? Liberation from this struggle. So you understand the mood of Gajendra through his prayers when you read it. It's not necessarily like, some of the other prayers we might see from other personalities where it's asking for devotional service or asking for, you know, just like being in the mood at all times, like Prahlad Maharaj, right? Like whenever he faced danger, he wasn't asking for liberation from that struggle or that moment of distress. He was just continuously thinking about Krishna and doing devotional service in his own way, regardless of the situation, right? So there's a difference in mood there when you look at the prayers. So Gajendra is kind of sick and tired of it all. He makes his case to the Lord. He sincerely offers his prayers to the Lord wherever he might be. And in the meanwhile, he's getting dragged deeper and deeper and deeper into the lake, right? And as he finishes, he sees a flying figure in the distance, right? Someone's flying on an eagle type figure. It's not a hallucination. It's actually Lord Vishnu himself, right? Traveling on his companion Garuda, right? So at this glorious sight, Gajendra is tired, he's beaten, he's sinking into the water. But despite that, with the last of his strength, he grabs a lotus flower that's near his head with his trunk and raises it high up as far as he can to offer it to the Lord, right? He offers his obeisances to the Lord and he offers this flower to the Lord. So the Lord, seeing this and hearing the plight of his devotee, accepts the flower, comes down to accept the flower, and he pulls Gajendra and the crocodile out of the water and cuts apart the crocodile's mouth with his Sudarshan disc, right? So the Lord, in that moment, also transforms the crocodile back into King Huhu, and Huhu, having already realized his regrets and mistakes, takes the time to be grateful and offer respects to the Lord and prayers to the Lord to show his gratitude for being able to, learn from his mistakes and being saved by the Lord in this way, right? So in this way, because he's transformed back into King Huhu, he's allowed the opportunity to return to his original planet and basically live the rest of his life as a spiritually liberated person, right? Um, the Lord then addresses Gajendra, who's also so overcome with gratitude and so filled with all the mercy the Lord has decided to show him and the relief that he's been saved from this dire situation, that he's overcome with the desire to serve the Lord forever, regardless of any other external situations or, you know, uh, situations. So the elephant Gajendra transforms into a servant of the Lord, in the mood of, in the way that some of his closest servants will resemble the Lord. So he takes on a similar form to the Lord, right? Same type of tone, the four arms holding similar items in his hands. So uh then, because he's kind of purified and is able to take on this form, right? He's able to leave with the Lord himself to go back to the Lord's residence, where he can fulfill this desire to serve the Lord forever, right? So it's a happy ending for all the players here, which is fantastic. So we'll go into the lessons learned. So first things first, really obvious, just check for crocodiles in lakes. That's the very first lesson we learn. Just be careful in lakes. You don't know how deep they are. You don't know what animals are in there. Okay, that's just a very general lesson we learned, right? And then less obvious, we'll go into how in the past lives of both Gajendra and the crocodile, their offense was rooted in how they treated other devotees, right? And it's important to realize that we need to treat devotees with respect and care, regardless of their position, if they're senior devotees, if they're new devotees, if they're peers. There's a high importance on treating them with respect and care, because despite ourselves being a good devotee, Vaishnava Aparad, even the smallest offense can bring us into a deep downfall, right? So for Gajendra, or King Dudumya rather, it was not being able to receive and treat a devotee when they visited his dwelling, right? That caused a lifetime and this millennium of distress as an elephant with the crocodile. And then King Huhu disrespected a devotee by taking a joke too far and interrupting his services. And that offense caused him to become a crocodile and be engaged in the struggle as well, right? So we need to be very, very careful, because offending a devotee and then to the point where they're not easily forgiving us, that's like the worst type of aparad you can make, right? Because Krishna doesn't forgive us on behalf of them. We need to seek forgiveness from the devotee, and that requires a lot of penance sometimes. So we just need to be really careful from the get-go. The importance of surrender is very, very visible in this pastime, right? So Gajendra didn't realize quickly the situation and how dire it was. It took him 1,000 years to realize no one was helping him and no one was going to help him. And he continued to struggle on his own, right? He was looking for others for support and for help. And he continued to think that he could get out of it by himself for over like hundreds and hundreds of years, for a millennium, right? And then he finally realizes that, oh, maybe I can't do this and I need to surrender to the Lord, because he's the only one that can bring me out of the situation, right? So that kind of timeline we can't do. So we can't take on the mood of Gajendra thinking, I'll try for a few like years and like see if I can do it before, fully surrendering, or taking the shelter of the Lord. That's not a timeline that suits us. So we need to be fully aware that situations like these, like in scale to our lifetimes, can happen at any moment. So we should be ready to surrender, right? Another example we see often in scriptures is the disrobing of Draupadi, right? So when Dusashan was, pulling on her sari to disrobe her, she was looking around the court at all of her relatives and loved ones for help. She looked at each and every one of them. They all shamefully looked aside. Then she kept clinging onto the sari, right? And trying to see if she could fend off his attack. But that wasn't working as well because she was weaker than Natasha in strength, and therefore it was a losing battle, just like Gajendra's battle, right? And eventually Draupadi uh gives up. She fully surrenders to the Lord. She's hanging on with two hands, then one hand, and then finally both hands are raised up and surrender to the Lord, asking for protection, right? So there's also that progression and struggle, and results don't happen until you fully surrender, right? Because only then does Krishna know, like, okay, this devotee is ready to come to me and they're fully depending on me, right? So then I will reciprocate. So that's a very important aspect that we learn from the story. Another thing we learned is spiritual progress is never lost, and devotional service is the key, right? So we learn, especially in the case of King Idudumna, right? He was a very religious, pious person who was dedicated to his devotional service, and he made a mistake, right? He committed an offense. So he was unable to continue on to the next stage because of that offense. He had to take on another life and do the penance for that mistake through that curse, right? But by the mercy of the Lord, he was able to, once the surrender happened, right? He was able to remember the prayers and the verses in the Sanskrit he knew in his last life, and he often recited in his last life. And then the other thing to notice here is that it wasn't just a rotation of prayers that helped Gajendra. Like Lord Vishnu didn't swoop down as soon as Gajendra was done with his last prayer, right? What did he do? What else did he do? It was the offering of the lotus flower, right? That was the only type of devotional service Gajendra could do at that point. But that devotional service was it was the most sincere thing he could do in that moment, right? With no thoughts at all, just happy at the sight of the Lord, he offers this lotus flower with the remaining strength. And that pleases Lord Vishnu enough for him to come down and save this devotee who is in such a dire struggle, right? So it's not just enough to have mercy as well. You need to, in order to get that mercy, you need to show the effort and show that effort through devotional service that is unmotivated and pure, right? And so our entire lifetime is dedicated to developing that kind of mood with our devotional service, right? For myself personally, like there's times where I know I'm doing it for a reason, for an alternative reason. It's not pure. So I'm still working on that myself. So a lot of devotees, like our main focus, right, is to develop that service attitude. And that can take years and years, if not lifetimes, right? But it's also important to remember that with the mercy of the Lord, that spiritual progress is never lost. So don't feel like it's like a futile effort because you're only doing so little. You're not progressing as much as you think you are in the time you have, or you feel like you're not putting enough effort in. Like whatever effort you make is saved as well. So just be sincere and make as much genuine organic progress as you can, because feeling futile about it and giving up before you get anywhere is not going to help anyone at all. So you might as well do your future self a favor and do as much as you can right now, so you give yourself better chances, right? um and then last but not least is cultivating the habit of praying to Krishna, right? So in this case, Gajendra remembered the prayers he was so often did in his past life, and he was able to, as soon as he remembered them, be able to pray to Krishna, and like in this extreme moment of pain and distress, right? He's been bitten for like 1,000 years, and yet he's able to recite all these prayers with genuine like emotion and genuine love, right? So for us, that's really hard. When you have really, really acute moments of distress, it is really hard to remember Krishna if you do not make it a habit from the get-go, right? You can't just take it easy and assume like, oh, when a car accident happens or when like a family member gets like super sick in the hospital, that I'll be able to properly remember him because I have done whatever little I did, right? It's not enough. I can say from personal experience that yeah, just to be super like transparent, right? I've had family members, my dad, be in the hospital twice. So the first time he was in the hospital, I really, really, really struggled like with my mentality and like thinking about what to pray. And it was just a really bad mental state because I didn't even know what to ask Krishna, what to ask Nrsimhadev, what to even, say in my prayers, right? It was a very confusing time for me because I was scared and I needed help. And I didn't know, I knew the medical professionals were doing their best, but yet I didn't know how to pray. So learning from that mistake, I tried to make it a habit, right? I talked to other people, read some things, and it's really important you make it kind of a daily habit. So even for the minor inconveniences of life, I ended up trying to pray to Krishna. Like, I stubbed my toe, like, oh Krishna, like try to make it like a reflex. You have to train your mind even with the smallest things, right? Like usually like when I stub my toe, I'd be like, oh God, like, like something like that. But like I made it more specific, right? I wanted to say Krishna's name whenever I instantaneously like felt distress, right? So if I almost like get swerved into a highway, oh Krishna, things that you have to like manually train yourself because your mind is very, very hard to train. So you got to start small and like make it a daily habit so that when big things happen, it's an instinct and you can build off that instinct to become more confident in the prayers you do, right? So, and then the content of the prayers is also super important. Oh, I know we're running out of time, but just the last point. So the content of the prayers is also super important. We learn from Gajendra's prayers and a lot of different highly qualified devotees' prayers, right? You need to come to the prayer in the mood of humility, right? You need to put yourself on a lower platform and you need to know that and show that that Krishna is, the Lord of all lords. He's the supreme personality of Godhead and he alone can save you, right? So you see in a lot of prayers, there's many, many verses. The majority of their prayer, like size, like it would be like 3/4 just glorifying the Lord and his qualities and his characteristics and his opulences, right? Because it's so hard to humble ourselves. Like just one verse is never going to be enough. So you need to force your mind and force yourself to realize you need to come in a humble state and ask sincerely, right? So there's different types of prayers you could be doing. You can always rely on the prayers of different acharyas and different personalities, but if you're making your own prayers too, or like writing something to your lordships at home, make sure to have a section where you're kind of humbling yourself before them, right? And then be genuine in whatever kind of request or mood you have for them, right? So in Gajendra's case, he's asking for liberation and, survival basically. But in our case, our kind of best bet for, prayers is like either like protection or better devotional service or a better devotional mental state so we can continue doing our service. There's many different types of prayers we can do, right? So it's just important to be genuine and humble and make sure that we're taking the shelter of the Lord as much as we can, right? So raising both our hands instead of clinging on to whatever we can struggle with by ourselves, right? So that's all I have for today. So I guess we can open it up for any discussion or questions or feedback, comments, etc. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mataji, for this wonderful presentation. And yeah, very beautiful points you mentioned about, humble mood and begging the Lord for mercy. Yeah, and very nicely explained about, there are so many facts I did not know, but, listening to your class, I got to know so many things. And thank you very much. So, anyone has any questions or comments, please raise your hand. Okay. Ashish Prabhuji, would you please unmute yourself?
Hare Krishna, everybody. Hare Krishna, Mataji. Wonderful stories, and thank you for putting your personal touch into it. So I have two questions, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first one is, what is the significance of thousands years of struggle for King Gajendra, right?
Mm-hmm.
There must be something, like usually people don't live that long. So if that's being said, there must be something behind it. My second question is, sages usually signify the calmness, and they get snapped so quickly. What is the significance of that too? Because even in Kali Yuga, even nowadays, people don't snap so fast.
Yeah. Both are really great questions. I will do my best to answer them and open it up for anyone who wants to add to it. So for the first question, right, the 1,000 years, we need to remember the setting of the pastime. So the setting of the pastime isn't necessarily like the material world or Earth, where people don't live that long, or even in Kali Yuga, right, people don't live that long, maybe like 100 years max. Um, the setting is the heavenly planets, right? So these are heavenly beings, heavenly animals. They're on a different level than us. Their bodily lifespans are so much more greater than ours, right? So if you scale down their lifespans to our lifespans, maybe it's like a year of struggle for us in our like 80 or 100 years of living. But for Gajendra and the crocodile and all these beautiful animals up there in that heavenly planet, right? Their lifespans are so much bigger, right? So that's why the 1,000 is equivalent to a heavy or like a long time of struggle in terms of their lifespan, right? So if it was like a year of struggle for them, like that's like a blink of an eye for them. So it doesn't really mean anything. So, and then also there's the fact that Gajendra is the king of elephants, and the crocodile was also a uh really difficult opponent, right? So they were equally mass in strength, just the environment wasn't suitable for one of them. So that struggle and it was going to happen for a long time, right? But their long time is on a different scale than our long time. So that's why it's like 1,000 years for them. And then for the second question, right? So yeah, we do see a lot of stories where sages kind of, curse at the drop of a hat at the first offense and things like that. But we shouldn't take this as a reason to think badly about the sages. A lot of these pastimes and occurrences are ways to teach us lessons, right? The people who are hearing about these events and these pastimes. So we shouldn't think like, oh, that sage should have waited like, 5 more minutes or understood the situation. Like, oh, how could he be acting like that? Like, that's also a very, very bad perspective to take, because then you're also doing Aparad, like Vaishnava Aparad that way. So any type of story you hear, even things where demigods are making mistakes, like Lord Indra and things like that, everyone's a very, very amazing devotee, right? On a level that we can't even fathom in our lifetimes. But we should always see that they're teaching us a lesson, something that we can learn from their enacting this pastime, right? So it's just a lesson for us to learn from them. It's not that they're genuinely like temperamental or angry all the time or not a good devotee or stuff like that. Yeah. So I hope that answers even a little bit of your question.
The reason I was asking, because sometimes if I tell to kids, they would ask such question too, and how would I explain to them? As an adult, probably I would understand there's a teaching involved, but if you tell the kids, that's when I think the struggle comes in. And that was the reason for the question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, brother. It was a really good question. Thank you.
Thank you. Shankari Kaur Mataji.
Hare Krishna Mataji, to both the Matajis and to everybody present here. So good to see you all. Amazing presentation, Sushila Gaurangi Mataji. The way you're a natural storyteller, I can say. The way it flows, it was amazing. I have a few comments. Actually, your answers were brilliant to Ashish Prabhu. I was just thinking of this part also, that the 1,000 years. Yes, for humans, it's difficult to fathom that kind of a time span. But we jivas have been in this material world for God knows how many lifetimes. In fact, if we add that all up, probably, I'm just thinking that probably it would even increase that that span of time that Gajendra was struggling with the crocodile in that pool. So we have to understand that it's not only Gajendra who has fought for that long. We have been fighting Maya in form of crocodile for lifetime after lifetime, God knows how many lifetimes. So yeah, that's one significant thing. For us, we only we are so myopic in our vision that we only take one lifetime. We forget that how many lifetimes we have already spent in this world. So that's why it looks like, oh, Gajendra could spend a millennium fighting, and we are just like 60 years, maybe. No, it's not 60 years. So I was thinking about that. And another point on curse. Yes, these curses may look like how temperamental these sages can be, but think about it. What happened to Gajendra at the end as the result of the curse? What happened to King Hoo or Crocodile as the result of the curse? Think about what happened to Nal Kuver as the result of the curse they received from Narad Muni. Think about what happened to Aghasur as a curse from Ashtavakra Rishi. Think about all those demons who were cursed by Durvasa Muni at different points. To me, it looks like these demons were handpicked and planted in the plot of Krishna Leela just to get delivered. So these curses are definitely, I mean, of course, there is lesson learned, but we have to understand that at the end of the day, these are super realized souls, and their words never go in vain. And their words may appear harsh to us, but there's always an ultimate benefit that is camouflaged in their curse. That's how we take the chastisement of our gurus as well. They might be chastising us sometimes, Siksha Guru, Diksha Guru, or anybody. They might say harsh things to us, but we must understand that those harsh words, they are not personal. They are to teach us a lesson. So these were just 2 points from my side. And another thing, the prayers, power of prayers. I mean, if we look at Bhagavatam, it's a series of prayers. Pick up any canto, at least you will find 2 entities praying prayers, and they are beautiful. Starting from Canto 1, King Kunti, Bhishmadev, and then, Canto 2, Brahma goes into this whole series of prayers. So wonderful. And, the point that you made about your personal situation, and I've heard from senior devotees that one thing we can do to become to remain prayerful all the time is that get into the habit of praying when you are in good times. Once we get into the habit of remembering Krishna, even in our good times, automatically we will remember him in that time, because it's very natural, to seek out for something superior, for something where we know we will get help from when we are in distress. But when we are happy, we take all the credit for ourselves. That, oh yeah, I got it because I did it, at the end of the day. But yes, that's the time when we need to remind us that Krishna is the ability in us. He says that in Bhagavad Gita. So whatever is happening because of his sanction and his mercy, and the ability comes from him. So if we inculcate this habit of praying in good times, we will be able to remember him in that time. So just my 2 cents, Mataji. Thank you so very much. It was wonderful, wonderful presentation. The pictures were lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your words of wisdom, Mataji. Thank you. Even I learned even more. Thank you.
Thank you, Shankari Gaur
Thank you so
Mataji,
much.
for such a nice explanation. Ramchandra Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, wonderful class, wonderful realizations, and I've seen practically, as you mentioned, or Rukmavati mentioned in the introduction, that you were part of the Sunday school growing up. Then you became a teacher, and now you're also speaking. So, a good lesson and message for all the parents who have little kids, that all it takes is being consistently exposing your kids to Krishna consciousness, and then the end result will come automatically. So one point I wanted to make is that this pastime happened in Treta Yuga when the lifespan was 10,000 years. So if you take 10,000 years, and if you consider 1,000 years within that, that's really not much. So that would be an explanation to the kids that Satyuga, the lifespan is 100,000 years. Treta Yuga lifespan is 10,000. Dwapar Yuga, the lifespan is 1,000 years, and Kali Yuga, which we are in, is 100 years. So considering that, 1,000 years is not much.
Yes, Prabhu, agreed. And time and to place, because right now we know that, right? In Australia, we have more sun time. So think about the place too, because this is all, whatever is depicted is, so this happened in the Jambu Dweep, but it looks like happened in a Trikut mountain. So Jambu Dweep has a 9 division. Bharatvarsh is the lowest division. Over there is a Kim Purushvarsh, about, like we all know. So this happened in the probably top of Kuru Varsh, where the Trikut mountain is. So that's why. If you can explain, like right now, they didn't went to moon, but let's assume that they went to moon. There's a 6 months, like 15 days day and like that, right? 15 days is the night and 15 days is day, hour. So this is like, it's a time and place. So so that's why the 10,000, it's just practically that fight would have happened. Like, say, we live only, like, demigods live only one day of Brahma, right? And like Brahma himself lives 100 years, but that 100 is like, it's everybody, son, like, so there is a verse in the Mahabharata, right? I mean, Bhagavatam, it says, Ayur harati ve punsa mudyamastam. So every, like, sun is setting and taking the life of the bodily concept. So first of all, this is like Prabhu said, it's Setayug. So they are not in bodily concept. Most of the people, like, King Indrama was doing his job, So it's the time and place,
Anybody else has any questions?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, Hare Krishna. Very, very wonderful presentation. Sushila, Gaurangi, I mean, so proud of you. You're part of Sunday school, and as Ramchandra said, that we have watched her growing up, and can't believe that she can deliver such an excellent presentation. So very, very proud. Just want to add one thing that just came to my mind, that it is so important to read these prayers from Srimad Bhagavatam, especially, I mean, as Sakri Kaur Mataji also mentioned, that there are so many, like an ocean of prayers, right? Brahma's prayers, in Queen Kunti's prayers, Gajendra prayers, and I felt that I wish we had access or opportunity to read these prayers in our youth. We didn't have that opportunity, but now Prabhupada made it accessible to everyone, especially even if you have small children, you can teach them. They have, you have it. Prabhupada gave it to us. And these prayers are so potent that it can give you that the same benediction if we read it sincerely. It can take us out of this ocean, material ocean, and bless us with pure devotion of Lord Krishna. So yes, one thing, it's very, very inspiring. And I guess going forward, it gave me that inspiration. No, I should actually dive deeper and sincerely read these prayers. Make it as a part of my life, and of course, give this to the generations to come also. Encourage them to read these prayers and learn the teachings from it. Yeah. So thank you very much, Sushila, Gaurangi. Haribol.
Thank you, Mataji.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And
Thank you.
just before we end the call, today evening we have a Govardhan Food Festival. So please do join at the center. And tomorrow's Sunday program, in the morning, we have the same Kartik reading, will be at 8 a.m. And followed by that, in the evening, we will have a Diwali celebration and the Sunday feast program at the ISKCON of Bergen Center. And on Monday, we will also be celebrating Govardhan Puja at the center. So thank you, everyone, and happy Diwali. And
just a few things I would like to mention about this evening. One is that please bring all the bhoga by 5 o'clock. If you're not bringing so much, or even if you're done, please come early. The door opens at 4. We are going to be there at 4. There's a lot of things to be done there. And also, we are expecting, some new people to come. So the first row of chairs, please make sure that if everything is taken and new people are walking in, and that they are given the chairs, please keep that in mind. We are also hoping that some non-Indian crowd may come. In that case, we will have some devotees usher them, walk them around. So give them space, let them sit down, and just enjoy the festival. There's going to be a lot of kirtan.